I promised you a bumper crop of news this afternoon, and I think we will definitely deliver. Wow, hang in there till the end. It's long, I know, but it's great. It's amazing stuff. So Kathy Wood talks a lot about having a 5-year time horizon. And for a certain type of investing strategy, that's very, very good advice. For many listening now, maybe you made your first purchase of Tesla during 2021 when the stock was in its 300s or even higher. So, if you're using Kathy Wood's advice, 2026 will be the time you'll hit your real 5-year mark. And by that time, I suspect you'll be doing okay. Now, you might have been in earlier, and then you've already made a bunch of money on paper, and you might be looking for the next big move. Well, I think 2025, this is not investment advice, but 2025 is going to see that move. We've got Juniper, apparently. We're going to talk about that. We've got the 4680 coming with, much, much, much higher production and maybe even very high production. We've got generation 2.5. We've got, which is the under $30,000 vehicle. If you don't know it by 2.5, somebody said a little while ago, there's no such thing as a 2.5. All right, we'll call it the under $30,000 vehicle. We've got the Cybertruck ramp continuing like crazy. We've got Optimus in the factories. We've got the Dojo fully operational, and then the new data center in Austin fully operational. And then on top of all that, there's FSD Robotaxi. Well, anyway, you've held this long. I think maybe you should hang on a little longer. That would be not investment advice. Let's hear from all the All In podcast boys. If you're not familiar, if you've never watched the All In podcast, it's made up of 4 self-made billionaires who do a very cool weekly podcast. This often includes Tesla or other Elon ventures. And this week they spent some serious time on SpaceX and Tesla. Now, this is going to be a bit of a long video, which I don't normally do, but I think you'll see why I've taken the trouble to do this long cut.
And have less latency. So that's going to be super exciting.
Starlink's apparently, I mean, I know everyone here is a shareholder in SpaceX, but Starlink's running at 4 million subs right now. That's like $100 a month, 4 million subs. And if you do the math, I mean, how many people have ISPs that are slower than Starlink, right? How many people have cell phone providers that they're paying roughly the same amount that aren't as good as Starlink? If we can get satellite to phone and you can get Starlink more broadly available, this could be a 100 million subscriber business. I mean, this could be
Absolutely.
one of the biggest businesses on the earth.
It could be the largest subscription business in the history of humanity. I think the largest ones right now are like Netflix, 250, Disney Plus, 150, Verizon, 100 million. So yeah, it could be hundreds of millions of subscribers. It could even
crazy.
be,
and
it could be the first 500 million subscriber product.
We could look back one day and be like, why did we run all this copper wire everywhere?
Well,
we don't need it.
Yeah, obviously, for
it's
sure.
Crazy.
Especially if it can get
it would be like crazy that we were like ever. I mean, the whole nutty thing about this past week, it's like we could look back one day and be like, why did we ever drive cars, and why do we ever have copper wire laid all over the earth to like move internet signals around? This efficiency gain that's going to be realized over the next decade is just incredible. Just incredible.
Chamath, any thoughts on the robo van or the cyber cab, the Model 2, I guess some people are calling it, but it's, the cyber cab specifically not calling it number 2 and doesn't have a steering wheel or pedals. I would have bought 2 of those immediately if it has steering wheel and pedals.
So
I want to drive it. Yeah. It looks like the hybrid of like a Model Y and the Cybertruck. So I kind of really love the aesthetics of it.
So beautiful.
Yeah, you like it?
My reaction was actually, I don't know, just seeing these releases now over 10 or 15 years, plus of knowing him, nothing. It's I guess it's like not that surprising. Maybe it's weird to say, like, I just expect him and his teams to figure it out. Like, they're just all so good. And the thing to remember, it's not just him that's incredible, but he attracts a kind of technical and operational wonder kind people,
for sure.
And that's just a really special thing. So I had that reaction, which was I was really proud and happy for them.
For the team, yeah, for sure.
For the team and for him. These guys are like incredibly fearless. Failed bigly, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to fail bigly.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I thought was crazy was how many people were trying to dunk on him this weekend. And
Yeah,
that
it's
surprised me,
weird.
caught me off guard, because I think if they were personalizing a lot of anxiety that they are feeling through these companies' successes, which didn't make much sense to me.
Well, in fairness, he did hurt some people's feelings with posting of memes. So, yeah, I mean, it makes no sense. Like, the guy's like going to save 30,000 road deaths a year in the United States with self-driving, and people are losing their minds over a couple of memes or who he's voting for president. I don't think you have to worry about that. You can just look at the products; they speak for themselves. Anything, Sachs? Any response on the Tesla front? Any thoughts on the bus or Optimus?
I mean, they're both very exciting products. I don't think I've got a lot to add.
Yeah, I love the bus, Freeberg. I think that thing could become like mobile homes are, ADUs, and you could just send them to.
Wait, can we buy them or no?
Well, no, not right now, but I think that might be, that's
Mom's
going to be
gonna
a
put
big
all his
question.
kids in one.
I need it for all my kids.
Yeah.
Well, see, if this was a platform like the Mercedes Sprinter vans have become, that you see
Oh
a
my
lot
God.
in Europe,
Oh
then
my God.
you could
Wow.
buy an empty one of these. It's got
I
enough
take
battery
one.
life
I
to
take
last a
one.
month. And then let's say you had your in-laws over and there was one that was set up as like a one bedroom. You could click on Airbnb or, Tesla B&B, press a button, and the thing could drive to your driveway. You could rent it for a week and then it could leave. Or let's say 1,000 people or 10,000 people were displaced because of a hurricane, Freeberg. You could send 100,000 of these to the parking lots at Walmart, which typically does a good job in feeding people and getting them supplies after hurricanes, since those are so ubiquitous. You could put 100 of these in every parking lot and have a place for people who are fleeing natural disasters to stay. So I thought that was like the most compelling product of the whole thing for me, was the possibility of a sled, like a skiff that you could do anything you want with. Would be really exciting for society. So congratulations to the team. And it's going to take a while, but I could see them having that robo
Also,
taxi.
I think congrats to Omid. He just got promoted.
I saw that. Yeah, he's in charge of all AI.
I think he's in charge of all manufacturing and sales in North America.
Oh, okay. Well, there it is.
Shout out to Omid Afshar. Yeah.
I mean, listen,
Guys, I have big news. I just bought my first Tesla.
Oh, you did? Did you go with a
Yeah.
Plaid Model S?
Model S Plaid, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
I test drove it
perfect
for
car.
2 weeks and sold itself.
And
yeah,
are
I
you
was-
using the FSD? I use FSD every day.
I use FSD and it was like really impressive. So
Super impressive.
I've tried Tesla a couple times over the years and I never really worked for me. The quality just didn't feel like given what I had before, the car wise.
You were an Audi guy, right?
But Audi guy, yeah.
Yeah,
Always loved
Audi
Audis.
guys are
And
unique
so I
guys.
was,
Yeah, that's like
anyway,
a thing, right?
it's a big milestone. I thought the FSD was the selling, and then the speed on the Plaid, it's just insane. It's better than my RS7. Like,
it's
incredible.
with all of my Teslas, I put it in chill mode because when it's in that Plaid mode or whatever, like coffee goes
it's my
flying.
favorite. I
The
love it. I
kids,
get on the.
but if you have passengers, the kids in the back seat will get like literally nauseous because it's too
Yeah.
fast. You gotta be careful with the passengers there. It's so
Oh,
fast.
it was awesome.
So there you have it. Another one of the members of the All In podcast, another multi-billionaire can pick any car that he wants, and he has chosen a Tesla and has finally given up his Audi. I thought that was all of that. Every bit of that I thought was well worth your time. I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, let's go on. We got Sawyer Merritt. Here we go. He says that Elon Musk was asked tonight why Tesla hasn't bought Rivian. A lot of people think you ought to buy Rivian. I've even thought from time to time for a fleeting moment that they've got enough tech and enough cool stuff going on, even though I'm not a fan at all of the front end look of a Rivian. I've often thought, well, maybe there's a reason there. Here's what Elon had to say. He says, I wish them the best. I hope they do well. The car industry is a very difficult industry. There's only 2 US car companies that haven't gone bankrupt, and that's Ford and Tesla. Rivian's going to have a hard time. It's insanely difficult to compete in the car industry. If we're not for 2 technology discontinuities, one being electrification and the other being autonomy, I think Tesla could not succeed without solving both. Now, what people are not picking up about that story is, did you hear what he said? Tesla couldn't succeed without solving both. Now, I think that it's a little bit of an overstatement because without autonomy, Tesla has become extremely successful. And I think, they could continue to be a very successful company just by adding more vehicles to the fleet and continuing to find, the niches that they're not in right now. But on the other side of the coin, you add autonomy and it's going to make it very hard for these other companies, which is what blows my mind with regard to the fact that they're not lined up at the door asking to partner or to provide some kind of licensing in order to get that for their vehicles. Well, Car and Driver came out with a story over the last 24 or 36 hours, and they were impressed. And it takes a lot to impress Car and Driver when it comes to Tesla. They're much rather write some kind of a slamming article, but here's what they had to say. The new all-wheel drive Model 3 Performance raced to 100 miles per hour in 6.8 seconds. That is 1.4 ticks sooner than its predecessor. Its lead only grew from there, hitting 130 miles per hour in 3.9 seconds, and that's quicker than the run of 12.3 in the previous one. Finally, the race to 150 miles per hour, 18.3 seconds. 8 seconds faster than 2019. So every time you want to drive your car from 0 to 150 miles an hour as fast as possible, man, you need one of these Model 3 Performances. Now, remember, if I was 10 years younger, that's what I would be driving. There's not a doubt in my mind. Well, of course, what's even more ludicrous, this is the story, back to the story. Of course, what's even more ludicrous about all this is that the 2024 Tesla Model 3 Performance has a base price of $56,630 before you take off the $7,500 federal tax credit, or in Denver, another $5,000. Meanwhile, its test numbers put in a company of EVs that cost about twice as much, not to mention it's now as quick as the gas-powered BMW M3 in the Shemaiah, what does it say here? In an M.Night Shyamalan-like twist. Would somebody explain that to me in the comments below? A 2023 M3 Competition X Drive and the 2024 M3P posted the same 60 and the same 130 mile per hour runs, almost identical quarter-mile times. Only the Beamer had a gas tank and cost about $30,000 more than the Tesla. Yeah, it costs you less to buy by a bunch, costs you less to own by a bunch, doesn't require trips to the gas station, and you know the rest of the story. Mario Nawfal has this right now. I think this is a very important story. Tesla wireless charging tech at 90% efficiency. At the We Robot event, Tesla unveiled its new wireless charging tech that's changing the game. MKBHD, the YouTube influencer, slammed Tesla's new wireless charging as a massive heat waste. A really noble goal for something like this would be maybe 75% efficiency. Tesla clapped back. So this is from the Tesla the account. Efficiency is well over 90%. Tesla's 90+% efficiency is achieved by using free power technology. That's a registered trademark. A massive leap from the typical 70 to 80% seen in traditional wireless charger. Most wireless chargers rely on a single coil, meaning precise alignment is necessary to avoid power loss as heat. The Tesla solution, a multi-coil array that detects and adjusts to device position dynamically, drastically reducing wasted energy. What would you expect from, as Shaman said earlier? Yeah, what's the surprise? But really, they do keep surprising over and over again. It says, with this tech, you can charge multiple devices anywhere on the surface without worrying about alignment. This cuts heat waste, enabling faster and cooler charging. And it's not just for phones. This could revolutionize EV charging too, making wireless charging more efficient across the board. Whoa. Okay, then there's this from Energy Central. There has been a run of big battery announcements in Australia recently, and they just keep getting bigger. And this one from Neon would be by far the biggest. The project is being proposed at Goyder North in South Australia, together with an adjoining 1,000 megawatt wind project, a terawatt wind project. 𝐒𝐚𝐽 says that Goyder region has some of the best wind and solar resources in Australia. The largest operational battery in Australia right now is the Victorian Big Battery near Geelong at 300 megawatts with 400 megawatt hours. That will be overtaken shortly by a battery in New South Wales at a whopping 85 megawatts and 1,680 megawatt hours. A trio of big batteries south of Perth in Western Australia are either under construction or being planned. A 2,000 megawatt 𝐒𝐦𝐚𝐲 BESS owned by Synergy, a 2240 megawatt hour 𝐒𝐭𝐦𝐚𝐲 battery owned by 𝐒𝐚𝐽, and just last month, Trina Solar submitted plans for a 2,640 megawatt hour project. And batteries are already having a noticeable effect in Western Australia, addressing the issue of ever-declining minimum demand in the middle of the day. The record for lowest minimum demand was set last year, and the record would have been broken again this year, but the first big battery is now charging up in the middle of the day, soaking up rooftop solar and lifting demand levels. 𝐒𝐽's Goyder North battery would be up to 900 megawatts and 3,600 megawatt hours, and would aim to reduce the state's reliance on expensive gas generation, thereby lowering the wholesale prices of electricity in the state. You've just been notified that the future has arrived. Australia, Hawaii, probably California, many of the northern countries in Europe, and maybe China leading the way into a sustainable future. Be nice if the rest of the United States at least would join in and absolutely set some priorities and some planning to get this done. Like in 5 years, I think if we set our mind to it, we could really go 100% solar, battery, maybe some wind, and nuclear maybe coming back as well, as we've talked about before. This is Randy Kirk. If you haven't hit the like button yet, that would be lovely. Hitting subscribe would be even lovelier. And then hitting notify will be good for you, because it'll remind you. I changed my mind. It will not be tomorrow morning. It will not be the numbers. I'm going to go over an article that just appeared about Elon that I think we need to go over line by line. I think you're gonna get a lot out of this story, because yeah, well, anyway, that's all I'm going to tell you for now. And then tomorrow night, of course, we've got the regular programming, the Monday morning show, which is always shown on Sunday night. And you're probably already watching it every week. Okay, and then Patreon. Okay. The Kobeissi letter says the Fed's fight against inflation is not yet over. Super core inflation rose by 4.3 in September and has been above 3.0 for over 3 years now. Super core inflation is a key metric watched by the Fed, also known as core services less housing. Now, if you've been watching this channel, or if you've been paying attention to this kind of stuff on your own, you know that you've got the headline number, which is everything. Then you've got the core inflation, which takes out energy and food because it's too volatile. And then now you've got the super core, which also takes out housing. So basically what you're left with is services, okay? It's basically services, lawyers and doctors and CPAs and those kind of folks, all right? And actually me for the last 15 years as a consultant. Supercore inflation is a key metric watched by the Fed. Supercore inflation is now rebounding after materially falling in the first half of 2023. At the same time, core CPI inflation rose to 3.3, which is the first increase since March. But here's the point, and now it's me talking, not the article. Services are almost 100% labor. Labor is still at 4% or more up year over year and month over month, and doesn't show any indication it's going to be slowing down. And services make up a huge part of the economy. I think we can all agree that product inflation seems to be under control, but this component seems to have a life of its own. And by the way, when you consider that services notion does not include government, but should, because government Almost all of it is services. But it does include healthcare, which is a major part of the economy. And what we're seeing is that the parts of the economy that are doing well right now are tech, services, healthcare, services, government, services. Those are all doing extremely well. And they're all that's what's keeping the economy going. And they are seeing a continuation of way higher inflation than what should be acceptable, because who's it hurting? It's hurting, yeah, people making less than $100,000 a year. On the other hand, productivity gains from AI should impact services more than goods in the near term, and that should reduce some of the demand for that labor. But we have to wonder whether those hospitals and those doctors, the CPAs and the lawyers, and the people that do marketing consulting, whether those folks are going to charge less as their costs go down. That will be the question. All right. Barron's is reporting Wall Street is rife with speculation about the Federal Reserve's future interest rate moves. I'm sure you're very interested in that too. Now, researchers at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City have found a way to measure the uncertainty. Okay, so we can measure, we've got people that are betting, on what's going to happen. So you got the bets that are taking place on whether it be a 15% or a 25% basis. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. A 25 basis cut or a 50 basis cut or a zero. So you got people betting on that, putting their money out and making an actual bet. You've got, they go out and they ask a bunch of economists for their opinion, and we get that opinion about what's going to happen. We've got the dot plot from the Federal Reserve that gives us an indication of how the members of the Federal Reserve are thinking. And now we're going to have one that's the amount of anxiety that markets are feeling. So they came up with this method of determining how much anxiety there is, and it had to do with options versus stock or bond prices or whatever. The Kansas City Fed recently launched a new index, the Measure of Policy Rate Uncertainty, or the KCPRU, which uses options prices to quantify what we know anecdotally. There is considerable uncertainty about where interest rates are headed. At its current level, the KCPRU is around the levels seen in 2008 and 2009 in the late innings of the global financial crisis. That compares with, let's say, the 2012-2020, that whole time period in there, where the average only down around 0.49. The index is down a little bit the past year, but up from the record low of 0.17 in late 2020 in the throes of the COVID situation. So you've got a high level right now. You had a very low level during those years when interest rates were zero. So it says the current interest rate uncertainty is a reflection of the economic uncertainty that prevails today. On the one hand, unemployment remains low by historical standards. I wouldn't call it low, I would call it moderate. Inflation has slowed significantly, unless you just listen to the last article that I just read. And GDP is expanding at a healthy pace, unless you don't believe the GDP numbers, which I don't. On the other hand, the labor market is slowly softening. We've seen this. Inflation is still above the Fed's target, as we just talked about, and there's a plethora of potential shocks that could derail the expansion. How those trends develop will have implications for Fed policy and more. There's more that will have implications. So that doesn't mean that markets are unsure about whether rates will rise or fall. The Fed has begun cutting rates. There's substantial certainty about the fact that they will continue to go down, but maybe stay the same. But there is uncertainty about the pace and the magnitude of future reductions. Both will depend on economic and inflation data that officials receive as time goes on, with Fed Jerome Powell and others recently saying the Fed is making its decisions meeting by meeting. We're a place, quote, we're a place where reasonable people can disagree on the tactics, even if they agree on the strategy. This was a quote from Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco President Mary Daly, who at a recent event at the New York University. Policymakers stated their stated goal is to return interest rates to neutral. I'm not sure that's true for all of the members, a level at which they neither restrict nor boost economic activity over the coming years. Many economists and Fed officials put that theoretical rate, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3%. Now compared with the current Fed funds rate target of 4.75 to 5.0 and the current 10-year treasury, which is at 4.1. The median forecast in the FOMC's September SEP implied a percentage point of rate cuts this year, so another 50 basis points before the end of the year, followed by another full 100 basis points by the end of 2025, bringing the target to that area of 3.25 to 3.5. But then the question remains, will any of that actually take place? And when will it take place? And what will happen in the meantime that could completely throw it off kilter? I mean, for instance, my expectation, I've said it over and over again, but let me just repeat it. If Trump wins, not because it's Trump, but because it's a change of party in the White House, that typically creates a fairly fast improvement in the economy, okay? If we have a fairly fast improvement in the economy, that would be talking about Q1 of next year, Q2 would be going probably gangbusters. If that happens, I don't see how the Fed continues to cut because you'll be sucking up labor. There's not going to be enough labor to take care of any kind of a very substantial increase in the business cycle. I've been predicting that this will happen since 6 months ago. It doesn't take much. It's not Randy predicting it. It is a look at history, and pretty much anybody that looks at history knows if there's a change in government, that's usually what's going to happen. Now, if there isn't a change in government, I only think it's going to take a quarter more before the economy goes pretty good. So let's say April, May, June next year, we'll be getting to see that the markets take off. Now that in that situation, if things say fairly neutral between now and then the Fed might have time for some or all of those cuts, which would, of course, entice the markets to go crazy. But then what do you think is going to happen? Oh, if the business is going that good, unless the productivity, here's the key, if the business cycle takes off like crazy, and it's driven by productivity, therefore keeping wages within reason as part of that picture, because productivity, wages is part of the productivity equation, all right? Literally, the equation is the amount of GDP divided by the wages, I think, equals productivity. Double check me on that, let me know in the comments. All right, but that's roughly the equation. And therefore, if wages stay okay while the GDP goes up, then the Fed can hang in there because that will keep inflation under control. So we'll have good inflation, good job numbers, we'll have Goldilocks. Wouldn't that be lovely? All right, that's all I've got for you right now. I've already given you the lineup for tomorrow. So see you in the morning with that very special report on an article about Elon Musk. I think you're going to like it. And then tomorrow night for the the Monday morning program, which occurs on Sunday night. It's been great talking to you. Oh, by the way, earlier today, I did two videos, one with Brian Wang, which if you haven't watched the two, part 1 and part 2, about 2025 with Brian Wang, you should go back and look at both of those. I'll put the card up for the second part. And then to the extent that you watch the second part, you'll see a card for the first part. You can go back and watch that one too. And then also earlier today, I did a report that talked about not only the new, the rumor, which we'll find out if it's true next week, that the Juniper is happening next week, actually going to begin to start rolling off the production line, and also answered your comments and questions that you've had recently. I think you'll really enjoy that show. So I'll put that card up there as well. It has been great, as always, talking to you.